Hello, this is Megan Raymond with WCET. Thank you so much for joining us for our webcast today, Video Captioning, Features, Costs, Good Practices, and How Captioning Can Benefit All Students. We have a very full program today, so I'll move right through the introduction. We have several speakers that are eager to share their experience with you. I'd like to thank Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available. If you have any technical issues, please contact Blackboard directly, and I will put that number into the chat box. The webcast is being recorded, and I will upload that to YouTube. I'll send the link out along with the PowerPoint and any resources that are shared. I'll send that to you all if you've registered with us. And if you haven't, just check the WCET website within the next week, and those resources will be posted on the webcast main page. I do want to mention that the WCET and the Wiki websites, as well as some of our email, has been down. So if you've had any challenges accessing the website, please keep checking back, and hopefully we have that problem solved shortly. And if there's anybody that is trying to access the webcast, just send me a note in the chat, and I'll be sure to contact them. Just give me their email, and I'll send them the access information. Or feel free to forward along the access information that you received. We want to make sure that no one is left out if they registered and we were unable to access that information. One other note, thank you so much to Teleperformance Rapid Text. They are doing live captioning for us today. If you would like to view the live captions, you just need to click Control F8, and then you'll see a pop-up caption box where you can view the captions. We'd like to walk the walk, as they say. As we go along, please enter any questions or comments or share any resources in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that chat box as we go along. There'll be time for questions at the end of each section, and then hopefully we have sufficient time for additional questions at the conclusion of the webcast. And if by chance we don't get to all of your questions, I'll be pulling those out and sharing them with our speakers, and we'll get written responses back to you next week. And I don't know if anybody's, is it just me, or is this slide blank to everybody? Is blank. Okay. Well, this slide, thank you. This slide is supposed to be Justin Lauder's face. So Justin is our moderator today, and he's going to take us through the beginning of the presentation where he'll introduce our speakers, and then they'll get started. And I just want to go through here because for some reason a few of the slides didn't load.
Well, thank you, Megan, for starting us off. And let me first welcome all of you to this first webinar that WCET is doing with accessibility. This is the first of 3 webinars that WCET, the leadership, and the WCET Steering Committee have put together to deal with captioning and other issues in terms of accessibility with online and distance education and education in general. And I think the focus of this and the others are to help institutions develop some type of institutional ADA strategy as we all grapple with different issues with accessibility. I think this will help us as we get into the features of accessibility. And so today, as Megan said, we do have a very full program, and so I want to move into introducing our first presenters. What I would ask is that when we're not speaking, we can keep our microphones muted, and then the presenters will get us going. So we have 4 different presenters for today's session. They're all at various different areas and are going to speak on different areas of accessibility and captioning in general. First, we have Kathy Fullen, who is with Teleperformance Rapid Text. She's an educational representative. We have Christopher Kevney, who's the Manager of Media Services and Real-Time Captioning with Teleperformance. We have Tol Keeshan, who is the VP of Marketing for 3Play Media. And we have Amy Quinlan, who is the Director of Student Accessibility Services at Kent State University. So we've got some great speakers, and first I would like to turn it over to Kathy, and she will take us through some overviews of the law. And as she talks, if you've got questions, please put it on the chat window. Kathy?
Thank you, Justin. Let me just get the slide advanced. There we go. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to lay a foundation this morning for our discussion by taking a look at the legal landscape when it comes to captioning. Many of you may be new to captioning, so this is just a short overview, and feel free to contact me if you want additional information. So first, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 granted specific rights to people with disabilities at all institutions that receive federal funding. So you're probably saying, that's me, that's me, that's me. Maybe that's not you. But I'm sorry, I lost my place. We'll discuss sections 504 and 508 of that act because they're directly related to today's webinar. And you'll see that there's a difference between providing accommodations, which is what most of you are doing now, and accessibility, which is where most of us are headed. So Section 504 mandates that if someone with a disability requires an accommodation, that accommodation must be provided. So as a result, colleges and universities like yours began developing disabled student services offices to provide those accommodations. And under 504, if a deaf student requested that videos be captioned, the university would caption those videos for that particular student. It was accommodating specific needs of a specific individual. But Section 508 is more universal in scope. It requires that all electronic and information technology be accessible before it's put into use. And that includes web content, videos, multimedia, and distance education content. And specifically, 508 states that all training and information video content shall be captioned. And that's a game changer for your campus. Because under 508, all videos are required to be captioned whether or not there's a deaf student in the class. So Section 508 moves us from providing individual accommodations to guaranteeing universal access to your videos. And that's not an option. Just ask Harvard or MIT, with my apologies if any of you are logged on to our webinar today. But students complained to the Office of Civil Rights that, among other things, campus videos, including campus videos that were on the website, were not accessible. And so now the Department of Justice is involved, there's a lawsuit, it's a big deal. So compliance with Section 508 cannot be taken lightly. And the Americans with Disabilities Act applied disability rights also to any state or local entities that serve the public. So private colleges and universities are also under that umbrella. And does your campus have a television station? If they do, they should be aware of the Telecommunications Act, which requires TV broadcasts to include closed captioning. And that includes live and pre-recorded content. So this is just a brief overview. I encourage you to also be informed about any additional legislation in your state or local policies, so that you will know not only your rights under the law, but also your responsibilities. And finally, whenever you're captioning content that you didn't create, you need to be aware of the copyright laws. You first have to have copyright owner's permission to caption or to change formats, which in essence is making a copy of the video. So you would need to check the video itself or search the internet for the copyright holder's contact information. And then when you reach out to the copyright holder to seek permission for that video, also ask for blanket permission to caption any of their videos in the future. Make sure you get it in writing and keep a file of all your communications to establish a paper trail, because you'll want to be able to have that as proof of due diligence in case anything comes up in the future. Now there's a lot of talk about fair use, and I just want to mention that because to my knowledge, there's no legislation currently that applies fair use to captioning videos. It's still a gray area, so you might check with your legal counsel before claiming fair use over copyright permission. But that's also a big issue on campuses. So to summarize, captioning the videos on your campus is not an option, and it's no longer just about accommodating students' requests. The law requires you to make all video content accessible. But as we all know, that's easier said than done. And compliance creates a huge challenge to every campus, financially and logistically. And that's the reason for our workshop this morning. So with that, I'll pass the mic back over to Justin.
Thank you, Kathy. And I would just like to remind people, if you've got questions, please post them in the chat box, and we will take periodic breaks to get with the questions and give you information. Our next speaker is Christopher. And Christopher will be talking to us about the differences between the different captioning options, the definitions, and various video formats. So Christopher?
Hi. Captioning definitions. Simply, captioning is the process of turning the audio into easily accessible text and displaying the text at about the same time. Real-time captioning, CART, communication, access, real-time translation. CART is typically live captioning that can be provided on-site or remotely for classes, phone calls, meetings, or events. CART's a term applied to court reporters, stenographers, voice writers, closed captioners when they convert audio into captioning. On-site or remote. As technology's advanced, traditional on-site CART providers have started to include remote CART as an offering. This provides agencies with the flexibility to use captioning providers located anywhere, and it helps to reduce costs to the agencies. Some agencies still, however, prefer to retain the use of on-site CART, and sometimes, depending upon the need, remote CART may be impractical for certain individuals. But remote CART has really come a long way from its early days. Broadcast captioning. The broadcast captioning is much like CART. It's a text version of the spoken audio, but is a part of a television, movie, or computer presentation. Stenographer, close to verbatim. A stenographer is someone who transcribes what people say as they say it. Machine and software permit stenographers to keep up with people speaking at conversational rates of speed, and they can keep up very accurately. Raw or lightly edited text sent to client after the event or class. Now, this is one of the big advantages of CART, even for for everybody who is watching the event or after the event is over. The captioner can provide a script of the captioning they produced during the live event. These raw or lightly edited notes can be of great benefit to people who want to go back and review what they just heard in the presentation. Video captioning, aka offline captioning. Captions produced for recorded materials and added after production are offline captions. And typical of offline captions are verbatim text synchronized to the audio, During the production phase, a verbatim transcript is created first, and the captions are created from it. The transcript contains everything said during the presentation, and the transcript material is carefully researched when it's produced. Includes sound effects. Sound effects are added to the captions so that they will appear alongside the spoken text. Phrases chopped intelligently. Now, transcripts are chopped into complete thoughts or thought phrases to maximize readability and understanding of the captioning. So we don't break first and last names, numbers and their units are kept together. Information which should be kept together for clarity remains together. Always in the same language as the video. Well, typically captioning is in the same language as the audio of the presentation and is used as a service to deaf and hard of hearing impaired audiences. Subtitles, which is a translation of video from another language, this is different from captioning, and subtitles are typically foreign language translations and help people who don't speak a language understand a presentation. A transcript alone is not equal access. Often transcripts fall short of what is considered accessible. Transcripts lack the timing required to let a reader know when what is occurring in the transcript is going on in the presentation. Transcripts lack a reference to the visual content of the presentation. Closed captioning, captions can't be turned on or off. Closed captioning, most people are familiar with. They see it on television from time to time. It's the boxed text that appears on the TV, and you see it in places such as the airport and the gym, where it's generally too noisy to hear the audio content of the presentation, and they can be turned on or off or needed. Open captions, they're very similar in appearance to closed captions, but they're always on and can't be turned off. Unedited automatic captions, YouTube is an example. YouTube and others like them have created some automatic captioning systems. And typically, these automatic caption systems are based on voice recognition. This is untrained voice recognition, and the results are usually pretty poor. No punctuation, phrases broken at random. This can make the captioning difficult to understand under the best conditions. Often contain many errors. Now, if captioning is hard to understand, if captioning contains errors, it can change the original meaning of the presentation and often do not constitute equal access. If the captioning is hard to understand, it can't be considered equal to the original. Often, bad auto captioning can make understanding the presentation even more difficult. It's counterproductive. Video formats. Standard definition, high definition. Broadcast standards exist for standard definition and high definition. These standards govern the placement of captioning, duration, rate, and speed of captioning, accuracy of captioning. Windows Media, Video, Flash, Movie, etc. As technologies have advanced, older broadcast standards have been adapted and modified and applied to modern computer-based video files. Physical media, VHS, DVD, first digital files, tapes, DVDs, digital files, video games, and interactive software have extended newer video file standards to create their own standards for accessibility. Differences in delivery models. Among delivery models, a large number of different formats exist for presentation requirements depending on the content used. Captioned text files. Text files containing captioning are used by some software for integration into presentations, such as XML files for Final Cut and Adobe Premiere systems, SRT for YouTube, files for Camtasia. These specifically formatted files may include information such as placement, color, duration, essentially the same things that you'd see in traditional broadcast captioning. Captioned video. As with HD video, captioning may be integrated directly into the source HD presentation for transmission or airing during or airing by broadcasters. Third-party sites such as YouTube. A very common way for distributing videos is using sites such as YouTube and similar web streaming hosts. Caption files can be made for these sites with easy-to-follow standards and they have minimal requirements for formatting. They're pretty easy to use. Hosted web-based delivery. Sometimes existing hosting options aren't enough when requirements may include things such as very large text or high contrast text, offset placement, indirect hosting, and custom solutions can be created to provide accessibility for these requirements. And I'd like to pass the microphone back.
Excellent. Thank you, Christopher. And as we transition into our next speaker, Amy, and she'll be talking about some of the institutional challenges, good practices, and then I'm going to talk about some of the budget issues and a pilot that Texas Tech did. I'd like to also let people know that a number of sessions at WCET's annual conference will be dealing with accessibility as well, and so that's another avenue that you can get more information on accessibility. So with that, Amy, I would turn the microphone over to you to talk about some institutional challenges.
Great, thank you. Greetings from Kent State, Ohio, or Kent State in Kent, Ohio. I'm the Director of Student Accessibility Services, and we typically provide academic accommodations to students with documented disabilities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges in working with faculty and administrators about that. So our basic assumption when we work with faculty is that faculty and administrators generally want to comply with accessibility mandates. They may, however, be unfamiliar with the process of doing so, and so wanting to do so and knowing how to do those things sometimes are two different things and competing things. So our realization is that we often need to educate and offer training and resources on the how-tos for faculty, sometimes staff, but primarily faculty. One of the things that we attempt to do is sort of leverage cooperation and collaboration with faculty and staff by existing processes. So it's certainly the right thing to do to make sure that things are in fact accessible to all students and to all visitors and faculty and staff. There's a university policy, which I'm sure that not all, if not most of you have, that we as a university don't discriminate and won't discriminate against people with disabilities. Both the provost and the president have their individual and combined strategic plans. So for instance, part of the provost strategic plan is that we as a university will approach every issue and challenge and opportunity with the initial question of how will this help our students. So if you can leverage that existing strategic idea or plan relative to captioning and accessible kinds of things, that strengthens your argument sometimes with the administration. We as a university make marketing promises or assure parents and students that we provide equal opportunities so that everyone can benefit from all that the university has to offer. Again, something else that we can leverage. And certainly it's the cost of doing business. It's the right thing to do, but it is a good business sense. And the last thing is lawsuits. And unfortunately, or not fortunately, but the three Ohio institutions have recently been either cited by OCR or found to be in violation of EIT compliance. And so those are pieces of information that we can bring to the fore with our administrators and again provide some leverage. Some of the challenges that we face is that some administrators aren't always aware of the scope. So our office, as Student Accessibility Services, focuses primarily on specific students with disabilities. So Kathy talked about accommodations and versus general accessibility. So our office is intended to meet the needs of specific students with those disabilities and with captioning needs in particular. What they're not always aware of is that our office, SAS, isn't responsible for everybody's captioning needs. So sometimes they say, well, can't you guys just do that? And so there's an educational piece for that. No new news to any of you that the competition for resources in terms of time, money, and personnel is fierce, and so there is sometimes a sticker shock of relaying that the cost of captioning and particularly accessible kind of things to administrators is eye-opening. One of the things that we as a university have initiated a couple years ago, actually we reinstituted it from way back when, but a couple years ago we reinstituted a campus-wide accessibility committee. The original charge was by 3 vice presidents, so it had their backing, which is always a good thing. We have wide representation from within the university. All of our divisions are represented except for 3, and I think those might be athletics and advancement. We have lots of faculty representation. We have the library. We have resident services, KSU PD, the police department. All good representation. We had initial funding, which was key. I think it allowed us to feel like we had some say and we had some voice in some of the things that we could address as a committee relative to accessibility. The committee typically meets monthly. There are additionally subcommittees that look at specifically physical, curricular, which is where the captioning often comes in, and cultural and attitudinal kind of things relative to to accessibility within the university. Some of the results of the committee that have been productive. We hired a third-party company to do an IT accessibility audit for us, and we've gotten those results, and those were helpful and eye-opening. We've added some procurement language relative to accessibility, so the head of procurement sits on that accessibility committee, and we were able to add accessibility language to some of our RFPs. And then we also are floating and promoting accessibility language into the provost goals for this coming year, and we count that as a coup as well. The committee also allows us to sort of establish ambassadors so that those folks on the committee then can go back into their respective areas and offices and sort of be the voice for accessibility, and that's been a boon as well. And then again, because it's charged by three of the vice presidents, and it has certainly faculty representation, it provides some level of clout when it is that we go to different venues and either educate or present. So for example, with Faculty Senate, and that's been helpful. Some additional options that have, again, been helpful for us. After these 3 lawsuits came down with institutions in Ohio, we gathered an ad hoc committee to look at specifically our EIT policies or lack thereof, and how it is that we needed to, what it is that we needed to do to not be in that same situation. And so we are in the process of developing a policy and rolling that out and providing some education across campus. Additionally, our Human Resources Office has some training that's called Beyond Compliance, and that's anywhere from Title IX training to ADA training and accessibility, and we've been able to leverage some of that training as well and talk about specifically captioning and EIT accessibility. The university hired a vendor to do a climate study, a university-wide climate study. Accessibility is part of that, and that will be helpful. That's going to be instituted in the spring. Certainly, our office does a lot of faculty trainings and presentations, as well as to staff as well. Some of our partnerships that we find are key, certainly faculty obviously and deans and directors. The Office of Continuing and Distance Education here on campus has been amazing. They are strong partners, and they have offered their assistance and their expertise, and we count them a very valued partner. And the rest of those folks are also obviously folks that are departments that we have regular contact with. And I will pass it back to Justin.
Thank you very much, Amy. We've had a couple of questions coming in, and I'll get to those right after my portion here. What I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about, and I've talked about it on the WCET listserv a couple of times, is that Texas Tech has gone through about a year-long pilot process on how we were going to do captioning here on this campus, what units were going to be responsible. And it ended up being my office, the office TTU Worldwide eLearning, part of the Office of the Provost. And we are now charged with working with Student Disability Services and our IT office and others to come up with a university-wide captioning plan and captioning policy. So, but how we started our pilot was with a student-run captioning lab. We started in our Teaching and Learning Center with 4 undergraduate student workers that each worked about 20 hours a week. And they were all trained utilizing the Described and Captioning, Captioned Media Programs, DCMP, the captioning key. The students have used Camtasia to caption videos for us, typically working on multiple projects throughout the semester, working with individual faculty members. A couple of the challenges we saw right off the bat was one, having undergraduate students do captioning is great, but it's a very boring and tedious job. So we had to watch the students to make sure that they were getting the content correctly, getting the captioning correctly, and matching it with the speakers and what they were saying. We had to make sure that they were actually working and not shopping on Amazon, which we had a number do a couple of times. And we had to make sure they stay engaged. One big area that we also found right off the bat was that we had a lot of trouble with faculty accents and the way a faculty member may say something versus the way somebody else said it, and very technical lectures. You know, we had 4 undergraduate students from a couple of the colleges or departments on campus, but it's very hard for, say, somebody with an English major to caption videos out of engineering, or somebody that is in you know, journalism captioning something for biology or chemistry. So the content ended up being an issue for some of our students, and that took quite a bit of time for the students to get the captioning right, and lots of back and forth with the faculty members. Ended up being in the neighborhood of 19 to 20 minutes per every minute of captioned text. So it would take them quite a bit of time to do in-house captioning. So that's how we started our captioning process, with this internal run captioning lab with a couple of students to go through. And what we have now moved toward, we still have the captioning lab, but we have developed what we are now calling, and this is a draft, it's not finalized, are different levels of support, where if a class has a short video or just 1 or 2, my office and my staff would work with a faculty member or somebody in that specific department to caption those videos using free or low-cost software. Our next level would be videos that are longer than about 10 minutes, but less than 30, and those are arbitrary numbers. That's just kind of what we picked out based on what we thought our internal student captioning workers could do. But the courses can't have more than about 10 videos, because if I think Amy would say, and Kathy, that we have a certain amount of time, and we all know we have a certain amount of time to caption a video, especially if there's a letter of accommodation presented, or to get videos ready before the semester. So if courses have just a handful of videos, but they're a little longer, we would caption them internally using our captioning lab and our undergraduate students. The third level of captioning would be those that we outsource to a third-party vendor. And those are videos that are longer than about a half hour, or if they use more than about 10 minutes, 10 videos in a class. And that way, to outsource those, we would be able to get them done faster than the internal captioning lab can do. And we make sure that they're done very accurately and back, so that students have the videos as they're going through the class. And so that's what we have proposed, and that's what we have put into place. But of course, as we talk about all of these different issues, one thing that I think pops up into all of our minds is the budgetary aspect of captioning. And so, it's hard to do a line item for for budget, for captioning, because of the unknown. You don't know how many videos you're going to have to do. You don't know how many classes you're going to need it. You don't know how many students are going to have a letter of accommodation that will require you to do it very quickly, and things like that. So it's hard to do a budget line item for that. And Barb, TTU Worldwide eLearning is the group in the Office of the Provost here at Texas Tech that is responsible for overseeing distance and online education at Texas Tech University. And so we are charged with working on the online programs and all of our regional sites, but also for captioning videos here on campus. And so what we have done throughout this initial pilot phase is divide some central funding for the first year of the project that will allow a working group of faculty and administrators to develop a long-term funding policy. The central funds came from a number of sources, from the Office of the Provost, from the CFO, and from my central budget. And we have spent and we have budgeted in the neighborhood of around $200,000 to $250,000 over the last year or so, including the summer and into this fall, to do some of this work. That does not include the salaries that I've paid the undergraduate student workers. So this is not a cheap process, but it's something that has been very worthwhile for us. What I want to do here is stop for a second and go to some of the questions that we've had in the captioning. And first, Amy, Molly had a question for you, and she wanted to know, in an ideal world, and if money wasn't an issue, what would your dream be for how accessibility services are made available and coordinated on behalf of students, faculty, and staff?
The dream would be that put me out of a job. That it would be from the get-go, things would be accessible, and they wouldn't necessarily, students or faculty or staff wouldn't necessarily need to request any kinds of remediation. The example that I give is, and somebody may be talking about it later, but curb cuts and accessible ramps and those kind of things. When the ADA was first passed in 1990, that was a big deal, and I can remember our grounds folks and our architects thinking or saying out loud, this is undoable. How's this ever going to happen? And now it's just a matter of course. It's built into the aesthetic. It's built into the budget. It's built into everything. It's just what you do. So ideally, that would just be what we do. We are a universally designed university that's open and accessible to everybody.
Thanks, Amy. And as we move forward, I'll just answer a couple of other questions, and then we can move into our next set. One person asked, how do we enforce captioning, or how do we make sure that each instructor is made sure their content gets captioned? Right now here at Texas Tech, throughout the pilot, it's kind of been on an honor system. We have met with deans, department chairs, and faculty members, let them know about the need to caption videos. We've asked them to submit emails and requests into my office if they're using videos in their class. So it's kind of working back and forth that way. We have kept a master spreadsheet and have worked with the faculty. But it's not ideal, and I think we're still going to look for another process. But in the interest of time, I will turn it over to our next speaker, Tol from 3Play Media, and he's going to talk to us about the benefits of captioning, some must-haves, and some nice-to-haves. Tol?
Great, thank you. As Justin mentioned, so my name is Tol with 3Play Media. We have been providing closed captioning in higher education for over 8 years, and I will talk a little bit about the benefits of captioning. So the first benefit really is to provide accessibility for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. In the US alone, there are about 48 million people with some degree of hearing disability, significant enough to affect their day-to-day activities. But sort of on a broader level, there have been some interesting reports that have come out recently from the World Health Organization and also from the US Census Bureau And there's some pretty interesting findings there. One of them is that there are now in the world there are over 1 billion people who report some sort of disability. But one of the most interesting findings is that the number of disabled people is increasing rapidly and disproportionately with the population growth. And you might ask, why is that happening? Well, there's sort of a number of reasons, but mostly it sort of boils down to medical and technological advancements. For example, with premature babies these days, it's much more likely that those babies are going to survive, which is obviously a wonderful thing, but that might be at the expense of having some sort of disability. So the need for accessibility will become even more prevalent in the coming years. But it's also important to know that closed captions are extremely valuable not only to people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they're very, very important to all users. And I'm going to show you some of the other benefits that come with captioning. So although captions are critical for people who are deaf, it turns out that most people who use captions have no hearing disability at all. In fact, in education, they're used by ESL students and really by all students because they help with comprehension. A study conducted by the BBC, Office of Communications, actually found that 80% of people who use captions have no hearing disability at all. And they do it because it either helps them understand the content better or because captions make it possible to consume video in noise-sensitive environments. I think there are a couple of slides missing here, Megan, but I'll go on here. So the interesting thing here is that, so there's a site here for interactive video search here. So captions originated in the early 1980s as a result of an FCC mandate specifically for television. But nowadays captions are being applied across many different types of media and devices, and the content is being watched in different environments. For example, people want to watch videos in libraries and workplaces without turning on the sound, and so having captions really provides that added flexibility. Then another great thing about captions is that you can leverage them to make the video content searchable and interactive. The thing about video is that as we're amassing lots and lots of video, it's actually very difficult to find what you're looking for. And so we at 320 produce a number of tools that let you search across an entire video library and jump to a specific point in a video just by clicking on a word in a transcript. And similarly, for search engine optimization or SEO, if you're creating marketing videos and your objective is to get people to find your videos through search engines, then transcribing those videos is very helpful because Google doesn't know how to watch a video. It really relies on the text in order to understand what the content is all about. Another benefit is that transcripts can be repurposed. For example, some of our customers have told us that professors have used transcripts from a course as a starting point for a textbook or a journal. And also, the University of Wisconsin actually did a study recently, and they found that 50% of their graduate students used transcripts, when they were available, that is, as study guides. And it looks like I'm missing this slide here. Missing a couple of slides, but the only other one here that, let me see if, hey Megan, do you know if there are any others, if the slides I'm missing, the must-have and the nice-to-have slides? Do you know if those are at the end?
You know, I just pulled those out. I advanced to see if any were missing. Sorry about that. I don't have any idea. We've never had this happen before. And I am going to try and plug those back in so we can come back to those.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, Justin, so in the meantime, I guess I'll pass it back over to you, and if we have time, we'll come back to the other slides that were in there.
Excellent. Thank you. So what I wanted to do now is take some of the questions that have come in from the audience. And I think this question could be open up to both Amy and Kathy and others. But to what degree is captioning required in a course? For example, if a faculty member gives video feedback on an assignment inside the LMS, does that need to be captioned?
I'll take, this is Amy. From our perspective, Student Accessibility Services perspective, if there is a student who in fact is deaf and requires captioning, then yes, everything that is accessible and available to everybody else in the class ought to be equally accessible to that student.
Thank you, Amy. The other question that we have, and it's back to you, is how, when you talked about, in your section, you talked about an IT accessibility audit. How was that done, and can you share what it cost or cost estimates?
Sure. We put out an RFP, and I think 3 different companies responded to the RFP. And we went through those different companies, selected one. I think the total cost was approximately $45,000 to $50,000. And what they did is they certainly didn't audit all of our IT footprint, but we selected primarily 4 areas, and they sort of did a random search on some of those areas, and then provided a report for us.
Thank you, Amy. And Megan has told me that she has added the slides back in for Toll for the nice-to-haves and must-haves. So I'm going to turn it back over to him because I think that is some very interesting information and stuff that we will want to talk about. So there we go. Toll?
Great, thanks, Justin. So here are some must-haves for captioning. So I think that the most important thing is accuracy, and having, in particular, if you're going to quantify greater than 99% accuracy. So I think Christopher talked a little bit about speech recognition and YouTube auto captioning that is available for free on YouTube. And I think the consensus from everybody, at least in higher education, is that is something that is insufficient for education, just because the accuracy rate is not high enough. Speech recognition it produces a lot of errors, and when it's wrong wrong spectacularly. And but to go further than that, I think if you're doing captioning yourself, or even if you're hiring a vendor, please make sure that the accuracy rate is at least 99%. I think that's sort of like the standard minimum. The next item that's a must-have is to have consistent turnaround and deadline compliance. So this is something that, for example, at Free Play Media, we provide a range of different turnaround options, and you can even request turnaround as quick as 2 hours. So that's something, if you need something urgently, you can have it urgently. If you're doing in-house captioning, that's something to keep in mind. I think the key is sort of consistency. If you need to have a file captioned, but it's finals week and your student transcribers are not able to get to it, that's something that could produce a hiccup. Standards and quality is another thing that's really important. Transcription isn't something that, especially in education where you're often dealing with esoteric and difficult content, people with accents, and it's important to have standards. For example, when you're transcribing a math equation, there's a very specific way that you need to transcribe that, not just once, but every single time you see a math equation, it needs to be transcribed a specific way to maintain that consistency. So transcribers need to be trained in all of these different aspects of transcription. The next item here is video formats that support your video players or platforms or systems. Unfortunately, captioning should be much simpler than it actually is. Because of the range of the different media devices that we have, and because captioning is really sort of designed as an afterthought for existing technologies. It's sort of been designed, it's basically a hack right now. And so if you're creating captions for YouTube or you're creating captions for Kaltura, it's going to require a different type of video format. Certainly for broadcaster, for DVD, all those things are going to require different formats. And so it's important to be able to have access to all of those different video formats that you'll need for your systems. And the same is true for hardware compatibility. Make sure that everything is set up correctly. For example, if you're using overhead LCD projectors, you need to make sure that you have decoders that can render the captions. The second last item here, integrated workflows. So this refers to integrations that are in place, and different companies have different processes in place. But for example, at 3Play Media, we have integrations with all of the main video platforms like YouTube, Kaltura, MediaSite, Echo360, Panopta, all those different companies. So you don't even need to worry about video formats. You can, or even transferring files back and forth. You can basically just select which videos need to have captions. You press a button, and then all of the workflow happens on the back end, and the captions just show up. And I think that's, if you're only doing 1 or 2 videos, maybe that's not necessary, but if this is a process that you want to become scalable, I think you need to have those integrated workflows in place. And then lastly, I think support is really important. Things, as with any technology, things, you hope that everything works and things work right most of the time, but when things fail, it's really important to have a mechanism in place to be able to address those problems quickly. Nice to have. So it's account system. So what I mean by that is you have a video file and you create captions. It's really nice to have sort of a repository where all of that data is kept. So for example, if you need to get a different caption format, or if you need to use it in a different way, you have access to all that. It's not something that's exchanged by email and then lost. You want to have the ability to convert from one caption format to another. Again, if something changes, if you're, for example, using Kaltura as your video platform, then something changes, you're using a different platform, you want to be able to switch those over and not be locked into any one technology. Caption encoding, this refers to, I think as Kathy and Christopher pointed out earlier, usually captions are a sidecar file. So it's a separate asset to the video, and the video player is what renders the captions on top of the video. But in some cases, you need to actually encode the captions in the video itself. For example, if you're going to be publishing to iTunes, they require an MP4 file with the caption track already encoded. So you want to have the ability to do that. It's also really nice to have the ability to edit captions after they've been created. For example, we built a really sort of user-friendly editing interface that lets you go in and make any edits that you want. And when you hit save, it automatically propagates to all the final output files, and that's something that's really helpful and really nice to have. Then the next item here is the ability to add captions to YouTube videos that you don't own. As Kathy mentioned, there are some copyright considerations there, but there are also some technical considerations, because if you're not the owner of that YouTube channel, you can't actually upload captions to it. And we actually have a tool that allows you to overlay captions even if you don't own the video. Lastly, video search tools. Well, this is something that I talked about before. These are like the interactive transcript. Provides the ability to search through the video, leveraging the time text state of the captions that you already have. And then also, it would be really nice to have. It's really nice to have tools that facilitate captioning content that's difficult. In education, you may have professors with accents. You may have content that's just hard to transcribe. A lot of sort of complicated words, and you want to be able to provide. First of all, you want to be able to have transcribers that have expertise in certain domains. You want to be able to upload a glossary of specialized vocabulary to allow the transcribers to decipher the difficult content. And you want to have a multi-pass review so that multiple people are looking at that content. And those tools really should be in place in order to provide a high-quality transcript and captions. Justin, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Tal. And we are coming up on the top of the hour, and I want to give a couple of final thoughts and allow for a couple of the questions. I don't know if we will get to all of the remaining slides, but one thing, and I think Amy and others have mentioned, one thing to think about is how do you get there, and how do you get faculty to realize the need for captioning, and others have mentioned it, but why should we do it? Because it benefits all of our students. And maybe when you're talking to faculty, compare it to the curb cuts and sidewalks. At first seen as a burden, but now it's second nature. Captioning also allows for a teaching pedagogy discussion. Is a faculty member using a video in a class because they have to, because of the instruction and what they're talking about? Or are they using a video in the class just to say that they're using a video? And it may lead to other discussions on best practices in teaching and when you should and when you shouldn't be using video in a classroom. And here for the last couple of minutes, I want to go back to a couple of the questions. And Tol, this one would be for you. Do you have any thoughts about captioning in a mobile learning environment? Is that a challenge? Does the technology accommodate captioning in a mobile environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, there's been a great proliferation with mobile technology, and providing accessible video is really an important part of that. Yes, so the main thing that people are doing to address mobile technology is providing a way to encode the captions in the video. So typically with a desktop video player, most people are going to be using an HTML5 player, maybe with Flash fallback. But I think what a lot of other people are doing is having a fallback to a QuickTime player with an encoded caption track. And what that does is that allows mobile devices like iOS devices to be able to render the captions.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, here in our last couple of minutes, I want to go back to Kathy first to see if you have any final thoughts to share with the group, or any questions you want to answer from the chat.
I just think that this has been a wonderful overview of the captioning challenges and solutions that are facing our colleges and universities today, and look forward to answering any individual questions that may come up later. And I hope that most of you have had a chance to, if you've never seen real-time captioning before, I hope you've had a chance to view the real-time captioning that's happening during this presentation, because that's also a key service that you may be providing to your students.
Thank you. Amy, do you have any final thoughts for the group?
I'm not sure that I can add to anything else. My only recommendation and advisement would be to make partnerships and to develop partnerships as far-reaching as you can across campus.
Christopher and Tol, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to say that I see a lot of questions coming up in the chat about different formats, and will this format work or will that format work? There are pragmatic solutions to just about any format. I saw PowerPoint go by. There is a solution for that. If you send us individual requests for information about what a practical solution for your video format or your need is, we should be able to come up with just about anything that you might require.
Yeah, and just a final thought. This is Tol speaking. So we talked about the accessibility laws earlier. And something that sort of just to keep on your radar is the Section 508 refresh that's really in the works right now. When Section 508 was originally enacted in 1998, that was when really most of the internet, I mean, most web pages were static and people weren't streaming video, and so captioning wasn't really as much of an issue, so it really wasn't addressed very much in that standard. But now with the 508 refresh, the U.S. Access Board will update that standard, and it's going to reference WCAG 2.0, and it's going to require A and AA success criteria, both of which require captioning for video content. And that's something that you should really start planning for, because the proposed rule, it was published in February of this year. It's still awaiting comments, and so I think that there's actually a pretty good chance that it will get published this year or early next year.
Great. Thank you all. And I want to thank all of our speakers for today's session, the very active chat from all of our attendees. Special thanks to Megan and Molly for all of their work in putting this together. And we are at the top of the hour, and very quickly, Megan has provided the information on the next 3 sessions in accessibility that WCET is leading and hosting. I would remind you all about the WCET conference that will have other things on it. And Megan, any other final thoughts?
Thank you, Justin, and thank you all to all of our presenters today. And also thank you to Lorena for doing the closed captioning. I will be sending the link out to the recording, the PowerPoint materials, including all slides, so my apologies that some of those slides weren't displaying, and the transcript for the closed captioning. So again, thank you all. This was a wonderful webcast. Our presenters did a wonderful job preparing. Join us for our next webcast. And thank you to Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available for our use. And thank you to our supporting members who go above and beyond in their level of support, and our WCET annual sponsors. Again, thanks for joining us, and if you're not a member of WCET, please visit our website for information about the benefits available.